What's going on, Axie fam? Elijah here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be jumping into something that has surfaced for the first time since I can even remember in Axie, which is a bird meta. These things have come out of the woodwork. They are doing serious damage in the arena, and I'm gonna cover a couple different types of builds that you can experiment with, and hopefully without having to spend too much money. As you know, everything can very well change. We know that when the season starts, it's just gonna be rares that you can use, and then epics, and then mystics. So I wouldn't overly invest into any particular strategy right now. So you may be wondering just exactly how you're supposed to do that. Well, the thing is, there's a lot of strong builds that aren't that expensive, especially when you can make small adjustments. So I think right now for the AOE version to be optimal, there's gonna be some parts that I'm gonna call non-negotiables. Now these are ones that I think you really need to push to have, and you can see that all three of my Axies have them, which is Tri-Feather, Earwing, and Grandma's Fan. It's important because this is gonna boost your feather production massively across all three Axies, and that's the core of this entire build, is stacking a boatload of feathers to do crazy damage from start to finish in the game. And obviously we're not going front and center. For the most part, we're trying to do tons of damage to all three of their Axies at once. This is an AOE comp. Also very strong is Kataro on the eyes. I don't think it's absolutely necessary on, two, for instance. So this is where you might start to make adjustments, but even from what I've recently seen, it's not that expensive out there. Let's take a look at the marketplace, right? So straight out of the gate, if I look at these three move sets that I mentioned, you have a $20 bird here that has everything, including the Kestrel on the horn, which is a nice card to have at least once, but it's also not completely necessary either. Things start to open up even further. Here's a $12 Axie. It's playable. The little owl is a dead card for sure, but it's alpha, pre-season, whatever. So for $12, you can just get this. Don't play the little owl. It's still a very strong bird to just mess around with. The Parasite and the Neo give you some card manipulation on your opponent. I think still, ideally, you probably want to have more damage here. The Kataro eyes, like I mentioned, but if you're just looking to get your foot in the door with trying out the build, there you go. The Robin eyes has insane potential to stack up and do tons of damage because this card has been changed. Now what it does is upon dying, deal damage to all enemies. You begin at 0, but once you summon it, anytime an ally deals a hit, you increase the damage by 4, cap at 100 damage, but I actually think that that is not implemented yet. I think you can go over 100 damage. And then, it loses 8 HP once its turn is over. So a lot of the time in Arena, this will just die on the next turn of your opponent. So maybe you can get it up to like 20, 30 damage depending on the sequence of cards that you play. So you can see how this is very synergized with bird metas, where most of their cards have either multiple hits or they're AOE hits. Some pretty wild things can happen here if you plan it accordingly, and I'm gonna try to showcase that here in a second. So this Dawn I'm gonna use as an example of one that, again, you can get for cheap, because right now that's gonna be the rarer of the ones to find. Again, Kestrel is super good, especially if you end up in like mirror matches with other birds. You can get rid of their feathers and their frontline feathers. And the way that this insane rune works right now with Sacred Feather is it makes frontline birds extremely tanky, because when they're supposed to die, they actually live with 1 HP, and then they heal for 5% of their max HP for each of the feathers. So if they have 10 feathers, they're basically healing up for half of their max HP. Super crazy. It's kind of like the last stand on mechs, how it used to be, except broken, because you're basically getting a half HP Axie back. But if they don't have a lot of feathers, which you can kind of keep at bay by having Kestrel, as Kestrel now dispels buffs on your opponent, then that can make a big difference in a match. So what I'm seeing here is for 21 bucks, are the eyes perfect? No. Is the mouth perfect? No. But is it playable? Absolutely. So you could grab one of these Dawns. You can notice that mine, I have Little Owl again on the mouth, not perfect by any means. But I would say try to get a really solid Dawn first, and then look for your 2 birds to have similar parts as these, and you will be on your way. You're gonna wanna play Sacred Feather up front, you're gonna wanna play Feather Fan at the mid, and then some of these Axies can get moved around too. I've seen Dawns at the mid just a couple times. You gotta remember that no one has this figured out yet. Everyone is just experimenting, but this is definitely floating near the top of the leaderboard right now. And then Healing Force on the back, a phenomenal rune. You're gonna heal yourself and deal 12 damage to each of your opponent's Axies at the start of your turn, as long as all 3 of your Axies are alive. And then, like I said at the beginning, feather, feather, feather. Tri-feather, Grandma Fan, make sure that you're putting feather fans on each of these cards, pretty much across all 3 Axies. You're gonna want tape on your earwing, just so you can wait until you have tons of feather daggers in your hand, so you maximize the earwing damage. I know this is all maybe a little complex for you guys, but that's why we're gonna go through a replay where I can break it down and show you what you're trying to accomplish in a match, and maybe demystify this a little bit so that you can go into the arena with some more confidence if you're trying to play a bird team. As for myself, I'm right now in the top 200 range with this comp. I've been trying some other bird comps as well. One thing I'm very interested in is Feather Fan. If we look at this midliner, it does insane damage along with Little Owl stacks. The problem is figuring out how you build this around this particular bird so that it can survive. It can always play its Little Owls, so you can't really have a bunch of other damage around it because you need to always prioritize playing these cards. Here we can see me, flirting around with this build of sustain and support essentially for this bird. And while it is not perfect by any means, I've had some very fun matches with it, and maybe I can show some highlights as well around this comp too. So let's take a look at a very standard and strong looking Poison team here. He is running Poison Touch up front, Regenerator on the back, and Gloomy Dice at the mid, which I think is a really good rune against this particular team because I have a lot of attack cards, especially when I get those feather daggers. They count as attack cards, so this can actually really mess me up. So we're gonna actually see here an interesting mouth card that I have on my frontliner is Lamb, and that was mostly because this was a very cheap Axie and it had that interchangeable kind of one-off part here on the mouth. I don't know what I paid, 15 bucks maybe, 20 bucks for this. So I went ahead and scooped it up, but it does come in handy from time to time. Like here, we're gonna go straight to the mid for 91 damage on the Gloomy Dice Axie. And we're gonna go ahead and 2x this one to speed things up a little, as I do wanna cover other games. Here, it's really, again, it's about prioritizing your Tri-Feathers, your Grandma's Fans, and then right away, I've got all these feather daggers in turn 5, round 3. There's the Scotch tape on the earwing, so let's prepare to see a bunch of damage across all 3 of his Axies, 48, 55, 56. And now I'm just gonna follow up with a few feather daggers to make sure that I can fully draw my hand next turn. I'm not gonna play all of them because having those around for when I do potentially want to play a Robin or another Earwing or a Kestrel, which also benefits from having more cards in your hand, is a good idea. So lately, I don't know, I might have miscalculated there, but normally I'm trying to keep 5 of these in my hand if possible. Heading into turn 7, here's that Kestrel I was talking about. While it's not going to get rid of any buffs of his, it is going to hit an extra 2 times, I believe. So Kestrel does an extra hit for every 3 cards in your hand. So here we can see I have 7 cards, so it's gonna get, a 6 card bonus essentially. 1, 2, 3, there we go. With Poison Touch, a little damage negated, but still, well over 80 there. Grandma's Fan, we're definitely putting a dent into this guy's reptiles and his dusk there, but he is also giving us so many poison stacks, 22, 22, and 21. So this is, I'm imagining, gonna be a close game. And then again, we have so many cards, the Earwing is gonna get a huge buff. I did draw a lot of Confused as well, so I'm missing an energy here, but let's take a look at this Robin, as I was mentioning earlier in the video, and how it interacts with this build. So we're gonna play that, followed by the Earwing. We'll see here that that's 3 hits. So remember, Robin gets a stack of 4 for every time it hits an Axie. So we're up to 12 damage now. When it dies, it's gonna do 12 damage to all of my opponent's Axies, but we're gonna add another 4 with a dagger, and then another 4 with a dagger. And then it's gonna go up to 24 by the end of this turn. So for a 1 energy card, it's now doing about 75 damage total, but you can imagine that if I had that extra energy and more feather daggers, we could have scaled it up even higher. However, we're gonna get a little lucky here. Our Robin is not going to die. He's only able to get 3 stacks on it, so it's still alive going into this next turn. Another Grandma, a Tri-Feather. Yes, we're getting confused cards in our hand, but look at our Robin. It is gonna go up past 50 damage, 56 damage, and we kill the midliner with Tri-Feather. So now this is gonna be 120 damage total, since he only has 2 Axies. It would be 180 if there was a third Axie to be affected by it, and that's all for a 1 energy cost card. This is the power of multi-hits, of Robins, of AOE with bird compositions. We're not out of the woods yet though, because he has more poison incoming and a Gila. That's a lot of damage, but we can see that the Robin procced. It was 60 up front and on the back, so his frontliner only has 24 HP now after the 12 damage start to my turn. The Kataro goes to the front. We were hoping that would go to the back, but the Tri-Feather brings in another round of daggers. I'm gonna fill up my entire hand once again, and then one after the next. It's 24 damage a hit because look at all the stacks that I have. We don't even need to play our last energy because we're just gonna be able to wipe him out with those daggers, which is absolutely insane. We hold on there just barely to secure the win against a very scary poison team. So let's wrap this up by taking a look at a more creative approach to playing a bird meta. This needs a lot of work, but it is extremely fun when it does pan out and I manage to book a win. As I mentioned earlier, the idea here is to always play my little owls, to play Feather Fan as much as I can when it makes sense, but I am prioritizing little owl damage because by the end of the game, it's absolutely absurd for a 1 energy cost card. The issue is just making sure that we can survive into that point. And then versus a team as aggressive as this, it's gonna be a tough task for us for sure. One good thing is I'm able to put Moonlight Thief up front. I've got Gaius for tons of HP on the back. And look at this turn 4 here. We're gonna be able to play a Little Owl and a Parasite. So we don't go with the Feather Fan. I'm not sure, it's hard to call there, but I think we need to prioritize the Little Owls still, even though Feather Fan just does an absurd amount of damage. And so you can see my opponent, he's got kind of that similar thing going on as to what, I just showcased in the previous replay, which is a high throttle, terrifying AOE team. Look at the Little Owl damage starting to kick in. Eggshell puts his frontliner down to 93 HP, but we do know that it is going to revive itself once it gets to that 1 HP mark. And my midliner is taking all the heat from those Tri-Feathers. The Feather Fan up front puts my Dusk down to 158 HP. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling it right now, but you can see here I've got Innocent Lamb with Cloud. So what I'm lacking is a way to support the feathers on my midliner. I did give it 1 potion here, which forces me to play this card, but that's something I always want to do. It has D grade. If I don't play it, it will basically get destroyed. But I gain 2 feathers on this Axie when I do. So I have that at least on one of my little owls. I actually Innocent Lamb the Strawberry here as I'm just feeling the heat. I can't really afford the Cloud. I'm already taking too much damage, and if that midliner dies, then it's all over for me. Like, I have no other closing power. That's another vulnerability with this team, is that it's all in my bird here. Maybe the solution is to supplement this with like another bird or a Dawn up front that can do damage and supply more feathers. I'm not sure, but this is what I've been trying out at least the last couple days. Oof, the Tri-Feather, all 3 go to my bird, and then an Earwing, I've got 42 HP. How the heck does this like turn? And he's got a Cottontail as well. He's gonna follow up with a Grandma Fan with Flamingo Hammer. I have weak on all 3 of my Axies. This is about as bad as you could ask for things to be going. He's slapping me with daggers up front as well. Well, one thing's for sure, even though I would love to play all of my damage cards here, like Feather Fan for instance, I simply cannot do that. Also, it would be an overkill to play Feather Fan into this frontliner. So I'm forced into a Strawberry here, as I mentioned. If my bird dies, it's game over. But he has no way to counter my Moonlight Thief. I've been stealing energy fragments all game, and I just got to that 20-20 mark, so I'm gonna have 4 energy going into the next turn at least. Play a Cucumber Slice to heal up all 3 Axies. 156 HP at the mid. Is it enough to stay alive? My Dusk is looking like it's about to drop here. I'm surprised he didn't lead with Kataro. Okay, there's the Little Owls. We just completely wiped out that frontline bird. It had, I think, over 130 or 40, and now that was like 200 damage on his midliner, and we have Feather Daggers flying into our hand just when we need them most. Because we have this 25 feather stack buff, we're doing 31 damage per feather hit. And that buff that you see has gone up so much because it stacks based on the number of hits, and we know that Little Owl gains more and more hits throughout the game. Feather Fan gains more and more hits based on the number of feathers that you consume when you play it. Ideally, you always want to consume 3 feathers. And we wipe out the midline. We've turned things around, somehow managed to claw back into this game, and we can see here that I just run out of time with this 1 extra energy, and had I gotten to play that, I think it's a super easy victory here. But as it turns out, we have to kind of drag things on a little longer because I would have survived essentially this Tri-Feather, I think. I may have survived it if that happened like what we just saw there, and it went 1 hit to the front and 2 to the back. It's gonna deal 3 random hits. It kind of would have been up to chance if I was able to heal that 50 HP up front. As it turns out, my bird up front does die, but the problem for him is that I'm gonna draw some revenge cards. I'm gonna get his Axie very weak, and ultimately, as we go back and forth a little bit, he's not really gonna have a way to deal with the healing that I'm able to put on with my plant. As we head into Blood Moon, yes, the Blood Moon mechanic is a little bit different, but because I have a higher HP advantage having Gaia's, I have 476 HP. When push comes to shove, I'm basically at this point gonna have infinite strawberries. I'm going to be able to always heal up to my max capable HP. And I think he senses that here, especially as I throw down another strawberry card. I play a Shiitake. It's obvious that this is an uphill battle that he does not want to spend his time trying to climb, and he just goes ahead and resigns. I mean, as I wrap up, we're just gonna kind of casually, I'm not gonna analyze, right? I'm not gonna say too much, but we can see there's so many different comps out there. This guy's running a bunch of Nutcracker cards, but ultimately you get to do things like this with Feather Fan, where I literally drop that thing down to its knees, play the ant on the backliner here. I don't know how I win this game. I mean, it's looking pretty dicey for me. This guy's got a ton of damage. The Nutcracker card's really starting to scale up here. Oh yeah, I think I remember this game. So he plays the Pigeon Post here, goes ahead and gets rid of that so he can clear out his hand. He kills my backliner. I have only 340 HP, but this is gonna be one of the better examples of, you know, this power, that if you can keep this bird alive toward the end game, then you can have insane damage. That was my, I don't know, 5th or 6th hit with Little Owl. It was 200, over 200 damage for a 1-cost card. I play the shield here, and you know why? I don't even need to attack this beast because I know that I have Feather Fan coming up in my hand, and as long as I survive, he only has 3 energy. He's got no Cottontails, no way to go to 4 energy. So as long as I live by playing that shield, here we go, 366 HP, 1 Feather Fan, and it's good night. All that health is gonna drop away. Absolutely crazy power behind that card, behind those owls, if you can find a way for them to stack. It's just if you can find a way for them to stack. Because against a lot of very aggressive builds, you know, the downside that we're not gonna get to see in this video is when you lose, you can just get powered over sometimes. It's a fickle build. It definitely needs to get smoothed out. And the other thing to think about is if you are gonna try this is how can you work in as many banishes into your front and backline Axie, or basically your non-bird Axie, because you want to thin your deck out. And that's another thing that I don't think I have figured out yet either, is that you want to remove as many of the other cards as possible so you can draw into those Little Owls faster. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some food for thought as the game becomes a little less buggy, and as I'm stuck in the queue less often, it definitely motivates me more to play and experiment and think about what we could be heading into for season 2. It's great to see that birds have resurfaced and that things are looking a little bit more diverse. I can run into birds and aquas and reptiles and poison, and it's not just one meta comp that I'm running into as we had in season 1. So that's my Origins update for you. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Love you. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.